You are listening to Sustainability 101, a collaboration between Warin Lab and Green World Foundation. Sustainability 101 brings to you inspiring stories of people on the front line of environmental conservation. This program is part of Warin Lab Contemporary Podcast, a podcast that explores art and sustainability. I am Sukontip Nakasem and I'm your host.
In that case, I think it's really into the concept of citizen science, right? A science citizen that you educate yourself, you look for information and you make the right decision. And then once you found good things from the decision you make, then you share with others. So you create a group of science citizens who can actually help each other and see how you can push others to change or you can create another new thinking.
Many of us are aware of SDGs, or Social Development Goals, which is an interlinked 17 global goals designed as a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The SDGs were set up in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly and is intended to be achieved by 2030. Sustainable cities is one of the global goals. The world's population is constantly increasing. To accommodate everyone, we need to build modern, sustainable cities. For all of us to survive and prosper, we need new, intelligent urban planning that creates safe, affordable, and resilient cities with green and culturally inspiring living conditions. In this episode, we talk to Tunnie Srisakulchairak, a program officer for green technology implemented by the United Nations Environmental Programme, or UNEP. Tunnie has over a decade of experience to promote linkages between science and policy in Asia-Pacific region. She has experience in engaging with national governments into the policy dialogue and implementing activities on the ground. In this episode, Vivi Siraponsi-Aram, Partner Development Director of Green World Foundation, speaks with Tunnie on the concept of sustainable cities and her view on living in harmony between built environment and natural environment. Here's a conversation.
Can you please explain what is sustainable cities and where is Bangkok at the moment?
The first question, I would encourage you to look at just the definition from SDG. SDG 11, SDG 13 is a combination of the sustainable city, community, and also climate change, because I think most of the emissions are from the city. The consumption of the electricity requires a lot of energy production. And Bangkok now, I would not say that it's good or bad, because I have been living as a loyal citizen to Bangkok for many years. But I have hope with the new generation that with the education that they have, they might be able to come up with some innovative ways to communicate about responsibility. I think in every aspect, not only environment, in any sector, you need responsible people to work on things, even in the education, even in the art, even in the car production. The leaders should have responsibilities also. Bangkok should be in a good way because the governor has started his work with the promise to plant 1 million trees. And now the issues that he has is where to plant 1 million trees.
I attended the event in conjunction with the renovation of the Lumpini Park on its century anniversary. The architect for the project said that we should look beyond the impact of climate change to Bangkok as our city is sinking. Do you see that this is an issue that we should communicate it broadly?
Climate change, even though it has been there for the last 26 official years, but people cannot understand really what climate change is. You have your own interpretation, and then you have your own sort of action against climate change. We talk also today, like still now, some people think that changing from plastic bag to the cloth bag is my ultimate action to fight climate change, but it's not. It's something more than that. Climate change has its own context, has its own particular, implication that require a lot of actions. In the city itself, if you ask me about the cities, I would say city and communities, because cities are built for communities. Cities are built for accommodating communities to live in peacefully, sustainably in a city. There was a discussion between the difference of smart city and sustainable city city concept, which these are two different things. There are some areas that overlap, but in overall, smart city and sustainable city are still two different things.
Can you please elaborate the concept of sustainable city versus smart cities?
First, sustainability has a concept of three compositions: social, economic, and environment. So anywhere that has the balance of these three elements, we call them sustainable. So how do you measure all these three elements, whether they are balanced? Then that's the question of how you quantify things. Smart city, the definition from the Singaporean expert that I talked to 7 years ago, he said smart city in his concept is still subjective. You want how smart you want a city can be. People must be smart first to use the city. Smart city allows him to go anywhere and work. So similar way what we are doing now, which is work from home, work from anywhere that has internet. But then people expand the smart city concept in their own context as well. But the smart city rely a lot on the stability of the energy, because if you don't have enough energy supply, then you're not smart anymore. You cannot connect to people. But sustainable city partly is on energy supply, but partly how you can sustain yourself in a city. Even you don't have this, you don't have that, but how you can live sustainably and happily in a city. So that's why when we talk about city, to me, it's more like a built environment that enhance well-being of a community who live in a city. So it's a combination of the built environment and the residents of the city that you balance yourself, and then it's become win-win situation for both. For example, the concept of sponge city would be best applying for the city along the wetland and lowland, because when raining season comes, you're prone to floods. But it may mean nothing for community or city on the mountain. Those people need trees to hold on to the land, so they reduce the risk of going through the erosion or landslide if heavy rains. And they don't need so much of the cooling energy. They need more heating energy. So each city would have to decide themselves to accommodate their own context. It doesn't mean that my smart city definition will fit your smart city definition, because in detail, things are different. And that's how the nature is. We have biodiversity. We are diverse. Every ecosystem has its own diversity. So same thing with human, with our settlement. And I think environment will support human no matter where you settle yourself. But the question has been how we can support the environment back so they can still provide the services for us.
And do you have the example of which city are considered as the world top most sustainable city in the world?
It also depends. For example, for the below sea level city, then you look at Amsterdam, because Amsterdam has been obviously below sea level for many years, even though they have applied some of the local Thai design for their city design, because they are really in trouble because they live below sea level. And you also have a city in the tropic zone, for example, Singapore, who has tried so hard to be champion of the sustainable city in Asia. And they have succeeded in many ways, but the cost of investment is not affordable for many other cities in Asia. And you have a city like Copenhagen or Paris who wants to be a green city, the champion of the green city after Olympics. So there are many good examples, but if you want to ask what it fits to Thailand, then I cannot name only one, because Thailand or Bangkok, we also have different features that we need to think about. For example, bicycle may not be a good solution for Bangkok to be called sustainable. Having bicycle doesn't mean sustainable, right? It has to be the aspect of why you need to have bicycle and how having bicycle produce benefits to your society. And that's how you sort of closer to sustainability. So it's more like a overall picture rather than a specific action that once you have this, then you can fix your box that you are sustainable. I don't think it works that way.
In Bangkok, to increase the green space is one of the policy, right? Could you share with the audience why it is important for the well-being of people to have, or even for the environment to have green area or biodiversity?
Okay. I would not use the justification from environmental aspect, but psychologically speaking, we are human, we are nature. Every day, we should have at least 30 minutes interaction with anything that is not built environment. So either in the park or in the river or sitting by the beach, at least 30 minutes per day. It's actually maintaining your mental well-being and physical well-being. So I think that's the bottom line that I have said to everybody, that if you ask me why green space is so important, it's important to you as a person, as a human. But if you talk about at the community scale, of course, you can find advantage of having a park on the internet. With the green space, the tree can purify the air for you, and it can slow down the runoff from the rain. There are a lot of benefit of having trees or park based on the natural system. But to you yourself, as a human, you are part of nature. You also need to interact with them at least 30 minutes per day to increase your well-being or to maintain your well-being.
You have mentioned the term citizen science that use collective strengths of community to identify questions, collect data, and develop application to solve environmental problems. Can you share with us a more example of how this can be done?
There are many good examples of how citizens can come up with a case study that change the governor's mind to do a new policy. For example, in Bali, if you have heard a very nice story of students who goes to the green school in Bali, and she and her friend noticed that there was no such a nice waste collection system in Bali. But it starts from the school because the school is the green school. So out of the school, she doesn't see that happen. So she wrote letters, she demonstrated to the governor of Bali, or I may get the position wrong. But then she communicated that and push until the governor of Bali, let's say, like acknowledge the issues and come up with a policy how to dispose the waste in Bali Island. So this is another way around, like instead of like the government develop the policy or formulate any measures to do things, but then this is the citizen who drives the policy. So it could be that way. And now we have the benefit of the new governor who is quite open. So we can try it out with Bangkok if you want, that he's quite open for the new policy. And from what I heard, he's quite fond of environment. So it could be a good chance to demonstrate like science citizen process, that not just only like, I don't have money, I don't have place to stay, give me the new policy, but this is purely with the evidence, with the data, with the scientific analysis. Then you make a case to the like governor level who can make decision. So it could be a good case for Bangkokians also.
What is the role of the private sector in help? Maybe we can start with Bangkok. Are there any like outstanding collaboration with private sector that help contributing to making this city more sustainable?
And I think you are involved to many of them also, which is on the plastic things, that you have a lot of companies, not even department stores, but even the stock exchange have their own program initiative to ensure that plastic is going back to the loop of production, or to be recycled to be another items, or even create a lot of jobs and innovations and also scholarship for students. So I think private sector has potential, and they have a lot of resources, either resources for financial resources, and also they have good human resources. Some of the private sector that I have discussed with them, they even have their own R&D to come up with innovation on materials, innovation on IT issues. But the thing is that they sort of like do not want to expose until the government policy are ready for them. So they put conditions onto that, and the government also do not want to issue the policy because they are afraid of being checked for corruption or whatever. If you have this policy, then by chance that company has this product already. So it's a chicken and egg things in the policy and also the private investment. But I think private sector definitely has a big role in improving our environmental conditions, and also a lot of roles in fixing the issues that we are facing now, because they are actually the one who produce. And that in a way, they also can be the one who solve the issues by changing some of the production process. And partly they are communities. I'm sure they also want to have a good environment to live on.
We have hope that the new generation also would do something. And then what would be the good place for them to start? Is it at the school or at the community, or they should come out more to put the pressure on the government?
I think self-education is the low-hanging fruit for us these days, even not for the students. And I wish that we can internalize environment into really curriculum of every school. But with the new generation, I have hope, because first they have tools, they have device, they have access to information compared to our time. the only place that we can find our knowledge is library. But for them, they have access to Google or to anything. They have access to information. That's first thing. That's why I positively think that they can be our hope, because first they have access to information, but they just need to check whether those information is reliable or not. And second, I think this day economy is open for the startup. We have a lot of good startup in the country itself, even though I deal with some in the region or even from Europe. So we need support to look at the startup that has accommodated eco-design and the green sort of principle. And with that, we can see how we can scale up, or we can do duplication of that startup into other communities. Because I think in each country, you have different scale of startup, and startup once you reach some level of investment, then you cannot call yourself startup anymore. You have to change to SME, and after reaching SME ceiling, then you change to the big industry. So with those definitions for investment, then we keep it aside. But I think startup is a place and a platform where the new generation can really come up with some innovation idea with the knowledge that they have, and with the mix of the composition that we may not understand in our generation. I pay attention to every startup, those startups that we work with. I really ask them about how to sustain their actions, because UNEP has a program to support startup, and I had a chance to join at the very end of the program, and I see that some have good sustainable way to continue their business for long. Most of the startups that I deal with, they work on plastic. They really work on how to collect plastic back and put them back into the production loop. But very little of them thought about how to reduce. So I think refuse and reduce is a good start. But with this, I interpret that they tend to maintain the convenience and rather fix the issue at the end of the line, which is to collect the waste back into the production.
As we have covered the overview of sustainable cities in this episode, we encourage our audience to dig deeper into the concept and push our policymakers to make conscious decisions on urban planning and city management for our future generations. Thank you for listening, and please stay tuned for our future episodes.